All right, guys, I am. All right, so your equations are already solved for y. We're going to type those into y equals and then see if that point exists for that line. So let's go y equals. Why? Because we know that parallel lines have the same slope. That's why we eliminated those two. I'm just trying to catch up the people from the video. Whoops. Oh, well. Second graph. And what do we get? Do we get 5, 0?
Yes.
Yes, 5, 0 does exist for this line. So I'm going to write the 5, 0 next to it. That's my maybe, a little question mark. But I need to know for sure that I can eliminate h. So the only difference between that is it changes the -6 to a +5. So I'm gonna scroll over. Second graph. And what does it give me?
11.
5, 11. Notice how it gives me 0, 5 up here. It gives you 0, 5 just in case you're not paying attention. But it is 5, 11, and I can now safely eliminate h. 5, 11. F. Parallel lines have the same slope. But you have your steps down here anyway. All right, next one. They will or they can test you on parallel lines, but leave the answer choices in standard form. This makes it a little harder, but it doesn't make it super difficult. Now, once again, let's go ahead and highlight that keyword parallel. Now understand, regardless if I solve it for y or not, if the coefficient of x and y are the same, or if the coefficient of x and y are 8 and 3, I'm looking for a coefficient of +8 and a +3. Because when I solve this, I subtract 8, divide by 3. I subtract 8, divide by 3. Subtract 8, divide by what? -3. Subtract 8, divide by 3. Subtract 8, divide by -3. So B and D represent equations that are not the same, where the slope will not be the same. So that's why I'm eliminating those. If you don't see that, then yes, you are going to have to solve each one of these equations for y. But I'm trying to show you how to avoid doing that, okay? Now, you do have to know that, because from there, we're going to plug in this point, this x and y value. And if you don't eliminate anything before plugging in the point, there's actually going to be 2 answers that are correct, okay? So you have to know, if I solve the B and D for y, it'll give me a negative slope versus me needing a positive slope, or vice versa. I think it actually gives you a positive, my bad. But anyway, they give you an x and a y value. What does each equation have? An x and a y. So what can we do? We can plug it in. And yesterday we learned how to plug in those numbers 2 different ways. Either you plug the numbers in yourself and test it, or you tell the calculator to do the plugging in for you. So we're gonna do it both ways, because we did have a couple of absences. They need to see it both ways. Here we go. Go to your home screen. Whenever you have a number that you're going to plug in, you do it in the home screen. If you're putting in an equation, or just an equation with no numbers plugged in, that's where you go to y equals. So let's do it. 8 parentheses 6, because I'm plugging in the 6. I'm replacing the x with the 6. Yeah, with the 6. Just making sure I said it the right way. And for the y, I'm plugging in that -1. How do you put your equal sign? Second math. So second math, and put your -45. What does that give you? It gives you 0, okay? It gives you 0. So that means what? Not true, it's false. So not my answer. Now here, if you want to know a faster way to type this in all the way, all over again, go up, highlight it, push enter, there it is. So the only difference between A and C is that they took out that negative. So I'm just going to delete that negative, push enter, and it gives me a what? 1. So that makes it true. My answer is C. Okay. Now remember, I told you guys that there's always that 1 or 2 students that always complain and say, Miss, I don't know where to put the parentheses. I don't know if I need to put the negative inside of the parentheses or leave the negative outside of the parentheses. Tell the calculator to do the plugging in for you. I need to put a 6 for x and a -1 for y. So 6, store it. Some of us were absent yesterday, so some of us should be paying more attention than others. Store it. Store is a button right above on. And X. Here you're telling the calculator, plug a 6 in for X, everywhere you see an X. Next, we got to plug in a -1 for Y. Y'all gonna have me cussing on this video. Where do you store it? Where do you see a Y? You can't push the X button, but there is a Y in there. Right above the 1. What color is it? It's green. So you have to press alpha 1. And there's your Y. Push enter. Okay. Now the calculator is going to do the plugging in for us. It's going to put a 6 for the X, a -1 for the Y. I don't have to worry about parentheses. Type in your equation. 8X plus 3Y. So alpha 1. Put your equal sign, second math. And the first answer choice is -45. Gives me a 0 because it's not true. Bless you. Second answer choice, +45. There it is. So either you plug the number in yourself or you tell the calculator what number you want it to plug in. Got it? But your answer is C. Next one. Perpendicular lines. I'm only gonna show you one that has answer choices that are solved for Y because that's the only way it's been tested in the last 6 or 7 years. So, but there is something very, very important that you need to know about perpendicular lines. They have inverse reciprocals. Now, for those of us that don't know what inverse reciprocals is, how do we change the slope? What do we use to change the slope? Yep. KFC. KFC or KCF, whatever you want to call it, up to you. So just know the slope does change, okay? It gives us a point. It doesn't directly give us a point. It gives it to us in words, but once again, it gives us an equation instead of the slope. What do we need from the equation? What number? The -4/9. We need the -4/9 from the equation. That's the slope. So we're going to use KFC to change it. Keep flip. 4/9 is going to change to 9/4. Simply knowing that it flips, you can go ahead and eliminate A and B. But the C in KFC stands for change the sign. So it's going to go from a negative to a positive. Okay. Now, any point or any line that crosses, regardless if it's a parabola or not, if it crosses the x-axis, what type of point is at 36? And what type of point are you describing? There's a specific name for it. Ooh. The x-intercept. Thank you. The x-intercept. The key word here in this whole word problem is perpendicular, but this is not describing perpendicular. This is describing an x-intercept. If you don't know that by just reading the words, then I would sketch it. Okay, well, it's telling me that the line, whatever line I'm drawing, here's my y-axis, here's my x-axis, it's gonna cross the x-axis at 36. So that means at this point's at 36. If it's crossing the x-axis, that must mean that it's an x-intercept. And that must mean that the x value is 36 and that the y value is 0. Okay? You don't know it just by reading the words, sketch it. Don't be lazy. From there, your equations are solved for y. So what can we do with those? Type them into y equals. So let's go ahead and type those into y equals, and we're going to see which one has that 36, 0. Let me move this over a little bit. 9/4. Yeah. Alpha y equals 9/4 x plus 81. Press second graph. Don't just stare at my screen, some of you. 36. I'm going to jump to the 36 instead of just sitting there pushing the down button. And what does that first one give me? 36, 162. 36, 162. So now we got to go back to y equals and change that positive 81 to a minus 81. Press second graph. And that one does give me my 36, 0. So the answer is D. But if anything, don't pick A or B. Don't be that person. From there are a couple of questions on horizontal and vertical lines. So I went ahead and gave you the acronym and what it stands for, and I drew the lines on there, but I'm not going to go over it because that's just super easy. And if you miss it, then God bless you. Transformations are pretty difficult just because it's very difficult for some people to convert from equation to function form, or to convert from function form back to equation. But if it's a linear function, if you see a straight line on a graph, or if all of your answer choices are in y is equal to mx plus b, if you don't see an x squared, if you do not see a x as an exponent, we're talking about linear. So look at the equation and look at the function. What is the only difference between those? On the right side of the equal sign, what is the only difference? F of x, what about it? When it changed to equation form, it became a what? No. Right side of the equal sign. F of x is in the spot where what goes? X. So converting from equation to function form, you would start off with an x, you change it to f of x. Or more than likely, they're going to give it to you in function form, confusing form, and you have to switch it back. So you're just going to switch any f of x with a x. It goes back and forth, but notice how m and b, they're in the same spot and they do not change. The only thing that we're swapping out are the x's with f of x, okay? Now, vocabulary that you do need to know is the steepness. Steepness, steeper. If the line is standing up more, that is steeper. If it's starting to lay down, it's less steep. Think of climbing or going up a mountain. If it's harder to walk up the mountain, that means it's steeper. If it's harder to go walk on the treadmill, it's steeper. Less steep is the easy level when it's laying down a little bit more. And then the shift. This shift up does not mean that my line is getting shorter. You're just running out of graph. They're still technically off of the graph. The arrows mean that it continues to go, but that doesn't mean that the line got shorter, okay? Shift up and then shift down. So let's look at the example that goes with it. Linear parent function, and you literally see a what? Straight line. So I should be thinking what? Y is equal to mx plus b, linear equation, y equals mx plus b. So it says which graph represents h of x is equal to negative f of x plus 3. Confusing form, right? Function form. This h of x is the same as having what in its spot? Y equals. So we got to convert it back. That's the best testing strategy that you can use. Convert it back. Now we got to figure out what's going to go on this side of the equal sign. Okay. F of x, we just went over it, is going to switch out with what? With just an x. Everything else stays the same. The f of x is going to switch back to an x and bring everything else down, that negative and that plus 3. Now, this problem in your packet goes with 4 answer choices that are graphs. I didn't give you those graphs because I would rather us practice graphing this line. So let's start here. What does this plus 3 represent? Your y-intercept. So let's graph that first. Your y-intercept, it crosses the y-axis at 3. And what else do we need to finish graphing this? And what is my slope? There's no number there in the slope spot. It's a -1. Now, in order to use that -1, I need a rise and a run. So I put that -1 over a 1, or put a 1 under it. So that means, since it is a negative, what do we do from that point? Go down to the right. It's always up to the right or down to the right. But this one, we go down 1, right 1. Down 1, right 1. Down 1, right 1. Keep going. And now that you have that line graph, just compare it to your answer choices when you get your packet. but there's my straight line. Oh, Lord. Okay. Yeah. There. All right. Turn the page when you're ready. All right. Quadratic's probably going to be the most confusing out of both of those to switch back from function form to equation form, but it all depends. This is the big question here. Is it on the y-axis or is it not on the y-axis? Did it just go up or down, or did it also go left and right? Now, if it's on the y-axis, if it is on the y-axis, if it doesn't mention anything about going left and right, that means you're going to stay in standard form, ax squared plus c. So you're going to see it in function form. Go ahead and change that f of x to a g. Most of the time, you're going to see a g in this spot or an h, g of x, h of x, whatever. But look at the right side of both of those equal signs. What is the only difference? The x squared changed to a what? F of x. So if you see an f of x in that spot, switch it back to an x squared. Or if you see an x squared in that spot, switch it to f of x to find your answer, okay? Let's look at the example. It says the graph of f of x is equal to x squared was transformed to create this graph. Okay, we just went over it. G of x is the same as having what in that spot? Y equals. Now I have an equation that's ready to go in y equals. F of x, because this is a quadratic, because you see that little squared, f of x is going to switch back to a what? X squared, and then bring down that -9. Nothing else should change. Okay. So we have an equation. It's solved for y. You can put it into y equals. So go to y equals, type that equation in, and just hit graph. Just graph. X squared -9 and press graph. The hardest part is switching it back from function form to equation. And you look at that parabola. Everybody see it? All right, let's go through the answer choices. What does it mean to reflect? That it flips upside down. Did it flip upside down? Did not flip upside down. Did it move to the right? No, it's still on. If you look at it, it's still on the y-axis. The y-axis is still going through the middle of it. So no, it did not move left or right. Once again, we just went over it. It did not reflect. Okay. Did it go below? Yes, it shifted down. So the answer is D. Questions? All right. Let's try another one. This time we have one that in the word problem, it describes it moving to the left or moving to the right. So if it says anything, or if you have a graph that is not on the y-axis, that is, that is somewhere over here or somewhere over here, that means it's off the y-axis. The vertex is off the y-axis. You're going to use function vertex form. So let's look at vertex form. What is the difference? On the right side of the equation, what's the difference? What happened to the squared? They removed it and did what? Put an F in the front. I wrote it over here. They took off the squared, put an F in the front. If you see an F in the front, take off the F, put a squared in the back. You can go back and forth, okay? Now, once again, go ahead and change this back to a G because it's going to be the name of the new equation. Let's look at it. This is the example. This one actually describes what's happening. It says it moved to the what? Left. It moved to the left, meaning we need an equation that's in what? Vertex form. I can go ahead and get rid of C and D. And we're actually going to go through all 4 answer choices regardless, but for those of you that remember this, get rid of C and D first. Make this go faster. Now, look at all of the rest of your equations. Everything has G of X. G of X can easily be replaced with Y equals, So here we go. Type in your parentheses, X minus 4.5, put a little squared back there. And which way does this parabola move? Your vertex always starts at the origin. This one moves to the right. This one moves to the right. Your vertex always starts in the middle. It starts at the origin. So we went to the right. All right. The difference between that one and the next one is we change that minus to a plus sign, hit graph. What happens? This time the vertex moved from the middle to the left side. Okay, so there's our answer, B. But just in case you don't know that, just in case you don't know, oh, well, it has to be written in vertex form. Everything else is also solved for y, so you can check those too. So I'm going to type in x squared minus 4.5, and you'll notice that it goes down. So that means plus 4.5 is going to move it up. Questions? All right, turn the page. After that, we're just left with the vocabulary. So let's just, I'm going to quickly go over this. Vertical stretch. Vertical stretch. You have a vertical line. Say you have a vertical line, right? I open it up just a little to turn it into a parabola. So what does a vertical stretch do? Make it what? Makes it skinnier. Horizontal stretch. Horizontal line, right? Horizontal stretch, horizontal line. This is a straight line. This is not a parabola. Let me add a little curve to it to make it a parabola. So even if it's the slightest curve, the slightest U, it makes it what? Wider. Now the ones that are the variable that's responsible for the stretch is A in both vertex and standard form. A is responsible for the vertical stretch or the horizontal stretch, okay? Shift. Shift has two different variables, if it goes up or if it goes down. In standard form, the shift is represented by C, but C has a very specific name. What's the name of C? It is your y-intercept. It's your y-intercept. Okay. Now in vertex form, you don't see the C, you see K. But just remember, K is not the y-intercept. K just moves the parabola up and down, okay? And then the reflection. Which one is responsible for reflecting? H moves it left and right. A. What flips it? How do you know when it flips? When it becomes what? Negative. So if it's a positive A, if the number right after the equal sign is positive, it'll be going up. If it's negative, it'll reflect, it'll flip down. The number right after the equal sign. All right. Okay. And just remember, we do not ever see a reflection across the y-axis, not in Algebra 1 at least.